we think of the Silk Roads as the people as the barbarians, but they are not barbarians. They're actually much more cultural than we think so. There is a big diversity of the Silk Roads. The thing that we know about the Silk Roads is that this is the normal Silk Road from the historical periods, the one that everyone is talking about. It goes through Uzbekistan, mostly Afghanistan, Iran, from China. But I'm interested in what happens above. So, like, above these kind of historical routes, and this is where my research goes. The oldest Silk Road evidence is actually 4,500 years old. So not 2, not 3, but 4.5. And it's actually the first evidence of the exchange of grains in Semirechye in Kazakhstan, where we have a grave in the site of Begash with millet from China and wheat from Southwest Asia. So we have the first evidence of the contact in the early Bronze Age, if you like. This is how it looks like. So 4,500 years ago, they found, with sieving of the soils from the burials, they found these grains from a wheat and millet. And basically, this is what prompted the Fraschetti team. I work with Michael Fraschetti and from the States to postulate this hypothesis about the kind of where we can put the earliest date so far. That prompted a lot of popular science outlets and magazines to talk about not the Silk Roads, but the grain roads. So everyone kind of trying to brand it in a different way. The way I'm actually thinking about the Silk Roads and the Bronze Roads, if you like, is that usually in literature we see that the Bronze Age populations are represented as people, as the wild horse breeders, chariot racers, the goat herders, so people who are living at the outskirts of the civilized worlds of Egypt, of Shang Dynasty, of Indus Valley, and so on. But that we basically, what we don't see is that they are the main carrier of the bronzes and the artifacts between the East and the West. And they are actually founding the first global economic network when we think about the sheer amount of metal artifacts that were circulating from the West to the East and back. And we know nowadays that the artifacts in the Bronze Age amount of like 120,000 artifacts preserved in the museum so far. So they were really kind of at the backbone of the formation of the first global economic network that we think of the Silk Roads later, but maybe at the time they were maybe the Bronze Roads. I'm quite happy to call them the Bronze Roads as well. What can I tell you if I go back in time about organization and connectedness along these Silk Roads? Nothing has ever been small in this region. Even when we talk about USSR down to the Scythian Empire, if you like, basically whoever owns the network, whoever owns the economic connectedness and the trading routes in this region owns the entire region. So basically it only shows you the way that the Silk Roads and the people and the steppe people work, which is quite distinctive from these state-like societies that are at the outskirts of the inner Eurasia. When we go further and we think about this phenomenon of the Bronze Age, and we call it the Bronzization, which is basically between 1600 and 2000 BC, we see this vast amount of bronzes being circulated in the area where the big kingdoms of these, I don't know, Egypt and Mesopotamia and Harappa and Shang kind of being at the outskirts, and these stars are actually the main tin sources. So what we can postulate is that basically the nomadic people, the people of the steppes, were the owners and the controllers of the way the tin was circulated the area, and therefore actively participated in building this world of early connectedness in Eurasia, the first global connectedness that we like to call the Silk Roads, but is actually many roads and many routes connecting East and West. We know from genetic analysis that Central Asia is quite important when it comes to circulation and movement of people, say Yamnaya to Afanasyevo in the Altai or to Kordedwer, but together with whatever they were doing, like economy, beliefs, culture, and so on, they were also carrying the knowledge of metal making. I wanted to give you some fun facts. So basically, when we talk about Eurasian steppe, what we need to know is that the major metal that survives is surviving in large quantities is actually this metal and metal production debris, not the genetic material, not the grains and so on. So we have to turn our attention to understanding the production. The major outbreak takes place with the intensification of tin bronze production, copper and tin. I have mentioned the figure of 120,000 artifacts being circulated in the area, of which we know nowadays and which have been analyzed by Professor Evgeny Chernik in Moscow. So we can imagine times 5, times 10, times 100 actually circulating in the area at the time. And it is important to say that copper and tin sources are found in Central Asia and China, and Professor Sadbulaev has also mentioned the copper resources and tin resources in Uzbekistan being one of the main deposits, and I'm actually coming to that now. I know that most of you know definitely about Seyma Turbin and Adronova, and this slide was also just to show who were the people who were carrying this production. Just to also show like the scope of exploitation at the time, I have put Kargali here in Russia, which is the copper mine dated to early Bronze Age and late Bronze Age, but I only want to throw some figures at you. It spreads across 500 square kilometers. It's got more than 35,000 shafts. It's got some estimated 2 to 5 million tons of ores and smelted copper up to 120,000 tons. And we are only talking about 300 years in the late Bronze Age. So it's massive, massive production that is unparalleled in Europe. We also have in Uzbekistan Karnab. And other tin sources, talking Karnab, about Mushiston. So these are the main sources that were also being used, being quite central to making bronzes, as you like, because copper is not as hard as a tin bronze, so you need tin for that. So these are actually the main resources, and these are the mountain corridors that were exploited very early on, and this is why the steppe people actually were quite important factor, if you like, in building these routes together with the civilized ones, the agricultural society, if I may put it that way. What I do, I'm an archaeometallurgist, so I study metals and I study chemistry and I study isotopes of those metals. So, for instance, these are the areas I work in right now, so I just shaded them across this map, and some sites and some mines I'm worked in, and these are the kind of artifacts I also analyze. I'm not going to harass you with the graphs, but I think I have only two for you. The graph I'm showing here is dense, but what I want you to pick up from this one is that I showed that all Kazakhstan tin bronzes are chemically clustering in one corner there, which is rich in antimony and arsenic, which is the characteristic of foul ores, so certain type of ores. But all mines in Russia and Kazakhstan are chemically clustering in that corner there, which is rich in zinc, which is telling me that tin bronzes in Kazakhstan were not made from copper from Russia and Kazakhstan. They were made from something else. So when I look again, another graph, which I don't want to go into detail in, is also I want you to take from this is the resources being used for making metals in Kazakhstan. One of them is in northwest India, and one of them deposits in Karnab and Nuratau in Uzbekistan. So which is actually showing different kinds of connections than the ones that are kind of assumed in the Bronze Age, that everything moves from west to east. Ideally, when we draw this map about circulation of metals going east and west, I don't agree. I actually show with my research that they go along the mountain corridors, as in we have seen, this is exactly the routes of the Silk Roads. And looking at the kind of exploitation, it is all of that is happening in the mountain corridors and by the pastoralist societies at the time. And it is the same as the movement of people. We have seen in the recent Asian DNA analysis that Central Asian populations were quite crucial when it comes to spreading ideas and knowledge and beliefs across the Central Asia into the, say, Indian Peninsula. So it's somewhat of an ongoing debate, but it's something that's been confirmed with archaeology by local archaeologists here. Obviously, going back to the final stage now is that all of these Bronze Age sites are very interesting because, say, some of them are on the historical Silk Road routes, but most of them are on these modern new Silk Roads routes, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is basically rehashing what we know from archaeology, is that the Silk Road and the whole connectedness between the East and West is millions and thousands of little pathways connecting the people together from Bronze Age onwards. In the end, I wanted to say that the Silk Road started with the intensification of trade and exchange across Bronze Age Asia, and it was made through inventions, innovations in technology, and it's basically showing us the direction. So where can we look further if we look, say, metal production under the microscope? Thank you very much.